fine. And I'm going to start recording right now. All right, good. Awesome. So as people start flooding in here, welcome. This is it was a quick impromptu thing. It was difficult to catch these two very busy people. And I was also having a tricky couple weeks. We wanted to do this for a while. In the sense that it's obviously a bit of a Star Wars themed month for us here at Agora.Community, as you all know, because there's a Star Wars based Anim Challenge that's currently in the works. So one of the things we wanted to do a bit more of this, but it just didn't quite work out as well as we would want. We still have a couple things in store up our sleeve that we haven't announced yet, so stay tuned for more. But for tonight, what we're going to do is have a quick little fireside chat with Lesley Headrick. And I always forget, Nicolas, your last name is?
Anastassiou.
Okay, so that's I'm glad I didn't even try, because I would probably butcher it, and then you would have to judge me. Yeah. So Nicolas and Lesley, Lesley and I, we go way back. Actually, she worked at ILM way back in the day. As a matter of fact, it was fun because the two of them, when they joined the call earlier in the backstage, it turned out that they were working at ILM at the same time, and they both had fond memories of basically the campus. But after that, she ended up in Toronto, where we actually worked together on a television show, and we've known each other ever since, although we haven't seen each other for a very long time. So this is a nice way to catch up. And of course, Nicolas, and by the way, so Lesley's been animating for a very, very long time. She still works in the animation industry in Toronto, where Nicolas, who I don't know personally, but a friend of a friend, actually got us in touch, and he has been working in the Star Wars universe for quite some time as well. And the extent of it is a little unclear, but it looks like did you work on every single season of Clone Wars? Is that true? That's what it seemed like when I took a look at your background and was like, holy crap, how's that possible?
Yeah, I worked on the entire series.
Every single one. That's amazing. And some other things as well. I think Bad Batch, I think you touched as well, maybe. And
when I was at ILM, I worked on the prequels. Okay. And then when I went over to animation, I worked on the on the Clone Wars. Came back to ILM briefly after the Clone Wars wrapped, and then came back to do the last season of the Clone Wars with Dave Filoni. Helped a little bit on Mandalorian season 1 while they were starting that, and then moved on after the Clone Wars wrapped, after we did the last season, to the Bad Batch and Tales of the Jedi, and I'm the lead story editor for those two series.
Okay, wow. Okay, so and Lesley, while she was at ILM, you worked on the prequel, if I'm not mistaken, right? When the prequel came out.
One of the prequels. So that was episode 2. So that was the Attack of the Clones.
Right.
I worked on that one.
So
my first, first show there was The Mummy was the first movie that I worked on at ILM, and then we moved the crew over onto episode 2.
Okay, as they kind of did back then, basically shift things around after a show kind of wrapped up, right? Were you there when it was still because I remember way back in the golden era of ILM, they basically had salaried people, where now it seems like they favor kind of more of a contractual basis, like basically everyone in the Bay Area now. So they kind of shifted teams around like they do at a video game company, where they'd have this team, they would work on a show, it ships, move the team over here, maybe some people go over here, but they basically were always managing and shifting things. Yeah, okay, So you guys both came from that era. So before I get too far into this little conversation, I just wanted to say really quickly, thanks for everybody who took the time to come in and hang out with us. Also, if you, for whatever reason, are watching us on YouTube and you want to be part of the conversation, the best way of doing that would be to join our Discord, because we're actually streaming from Discord. It doesn't give us the coolest looking stream because I'm just basically screen capturing the Discord display right now. But I think it would be a better experience if you were to hop over onto our Discord. So I'll make sure that the Discord invite link will be popping up often on YouTube. I think Scott's going to try to manage that, and that way, if you're on YouTube and you're curious and you want to join the conversation, jump on over here. We kind of do this stuff all the time. The animation Agora.Community is an animation online animation community, and our Discord server basically allows all our members to interact, and we do events like this when we can. So, where to start? Like, it's crazy. Like, there's lots to be talked about here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like back then, because you both worked, which is awesome, back at that really early days of ILM. Obviously, different experience. You were working on feature film, Lesley, where Nick, because you wouldn't have been working on the series at that point. You must have been working on something else, maybe film related, probably.
Yeah, I started at ILM, and I was working on the feature side. I was at ILM for about 10 years before I left.
Okay.
Actually, exactly 10 years. But by the time I left to go work at the ranch on the Clone Wars, I'd been at ILM for 10 years. And so I worked on features, and in 98, when I became an assistant editor, worked on Phantom Menace, and then in 2000, became an editor on Attack of the Clones.
Okay.
And then I took a break after that because my son got sick, and came back. And when I came back, that was like in 2005. I went almost directly to the ranch to work, to Skywalker Ranch, to work on the Clone Wars with Dave Filoni and George Lucas.
Nice. And so, like, you were part of like the spearheading team to like launch the entire series, because it would have been season 1 at that point and completely new. And
yeah, we worked on it for 2 years in a complete vacuum. George, who's always been, creatively driven, wanted to do the show, and he said, "We're going to do the show. Don't worry about, where it's going to be. I'll figure that out in time." And between, I think, Dave and a few others, but literally less than 6 people, started in 2005. Other than that, all of us, the earliest group that started was in the first half of 2006, which is when I came in. And yeah, when I started, we were at Skywalker Ranch, and there was probably like, I don't know, 20, 30 of us.
Oh, wow. And, grassroots. Yeah, it's so basically what you're saying is George Lucas at the time had a very let's build it and they will come attitude. Like, let's not worry about where we're going to put it, like how we're going to get it distributed. Let's just make this amazing thing, and it'll just basically sell itself, hopefully.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was always extraordinary about George. Is he is someone who believed passionately in creative vision, and also that the only way to do something to advance the medium, whatever medium it is to actually do it. Because if you try to convince people, they'll never.
Yeah.
We are in a notoriously risk-adverse industry. Where people embrace the risk that was taken after it's paid off. Yeah. And George was not afraid to take the risk and say, you know what, let's do it. And then we'll put it on the air.
It's funny because if you think about it, in society, like, it seems to be these big mavericks like George Lucas, Steve Jobs, because it was the same thing with Steve Jobs, right? Basically, he made a product, the iPhone, that completely changed everyone's lives. And people didn't even know they wanted it or even needed it until he made it. You literally needed to find a way of motivating a group of people to create something without any real obvious finish line or guarantee that it's even going to be a thing. So it sounds like George was, obviously a pioneer, basically, well, probably still is, just like that. One of the all-time world's biggest sort of visionaries. That's so cool. So Lesley, you joined, I guess probably a little after Nick, but because Mummy was probably a little bit after all of that, I think. I'm trying to put my brain. I'm trying to gauge. I can't remember when Mummy came out.
Mummy was done at the same time as episode 1.
Oh, okay. Well, totally.
They were in production at the same time.
Right. Oh, that's right. Because you said that it was the Mummy team that then they wrapped and then came over to help Clone Wars. Basically, that's how you ended up on it.
We moved on and started the next one. Yeah.
Okay.
But there was a few things happening, so a lot of people moved in different directions. But so yeah, that was the timing for that. Went on to episode 2 and saw that through till the end, and then after that moved on to another show.
Were you both, or were either one of you Star Wars fans going into this? Like, what was it like kind of working on something like a Star Wars franchise? I mean, I know there was a lot riding on, there was a lot of pressure with regards to the the prequel and is having you both worked on that, I would imagine like that would have a certain effect on you as a creative on a show like that. Do you guys want to share some feelings on what it was like to be working on something with so much expectation?
Sure. You want to go first, Lesley?
Yeah.
Well, it was very interesting, especially because of the timeline between when the first three came out and the next three came out. But after the first episode came out, and I worked with some animators that worked on the first one, and the majority of them really hated Jar Jar Binks.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was there was that creative feedback that came from people that
Right.
were working on the actual show
Mm,
that were talking about, the new
right.
characters being introduced and the stories and plot lines and that sort of thing. But just being a part of it, and of course Yoda was the big
Oh yeah.
selling point for all
Sure.
of us. If you
Yeah.
had a chance to work on a Yoda shot,
Yeah.
it was pretty
Coveted.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah, and you did
Yeah,
get a chance to work on a Yoda shot, which we will. Well, a couple Yoda
I
shots.
did.
We'll talk about that a little bit later because I have that shot here that you sent me, which would be great to take a little peek at. So yeah, I remember that too. I remember there being a lot of backlash. Jar Jar was there came, it received a lot of mixed sort of feelings and reviews. It's interesting. You're giving us the perspective of even the animators working on the show. They're just like, I don't know if I really like this character. I got to animate him. That must have been a little bit dicey. I mean, I try to put myself in the shoes of the creatives, the creative team back then, and think to myself, like, it's so easy, right, for everybody, all us armchair quarterbacks, to look at like the Star Wars prequel with our expectations, that are buried under nostalgia of our childhood, and then it's so easy for us to have these expectations that may be completely unrealistic. It's that boat might have sailed. Maybe there's no way of recreating it. That's the whole point. So it's funny because I went back and looked at them again recently, and I actually really liked them. But I remember at the time I was like, I don't know if it doesn't feel Star Warsy enough to me. But I'm very picky. But like some of the newer stuff that I see coming out lately, I'm just completely floored by how awesome that is. So it's amazing how, again, it obviously comes, doing this kind of stuff requires risk, as Nick pointed out, and it just requires a vision to just get it out there. And I mean, it obviously was successful because here we are still absolutely surrounded in the Star Wars universe. If anything, it's just getting bigger every second. So Nick, give us the Nicolas perspective. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different experience for the prequels than it is for animation, because on animation we can speak to both, but like on animation, like I learned to grow as an artist, and I was mentored and pushed by George, by Dave Filoni, and so I grew into like making Star Wars, which is one thing. For the prequels, I was part of this crew, and I'm part of a crew with animation too. But for me, and I was younger. The thing that was just amazing. I mean, of course, I was a boy in the 1970s. Of course, I'm a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
In that respect, like, yeah, of course, I was excited to work on Star Wars, to get that chance. It meant a lot on a personal level, but as a creative at ILM, the thing that was really amazing for me was the chance to work side by side with artists that I knew about, that I had read about. In many cases, those were the ones that inspired me to choose
Right.
the field that I chose, and to try to work at the company that I ended up working at. From stage people to the model shop, to post production. When I remember when we were setting up to get everything, to get a pipeline going, I went to the ranch, and I was working with myself and the other editor at the time. We're working with Ben Burt on setting up a pipeline so that we could work with them from the ranch to ILM. And you know there's something really magical and almost indescribable to this kind of full circle effect like working with the people that actually inspired you,
Yeah, for sure.
and also learning. No matter how experienced you are, no matter what age you are, you're only going to get better if you always consider that you don't know as much as you can and should know
Mm.
tomorrow, and so you know, like everything that Ben Burt would say was kind of like I was soaking it up. And then same thing back at ILM, you know, working with I made like, you know, lifelong friendships with people like Paul Houston and Steve Golly, and you know, these guys were like the original people
Hmm.
that were back in Van Nuys in
Yeah.
1975.
Yeah.
And the wealth, you know, they were the old timers then, you know, and so being able to kind of like all of a sudden do this and do this with them, learn from them, and at the
Oh
same time
yeah.
be a peer was what really was incredible, and kind of where I was coming into my own for the prequels. Was it was the first film that was shot digitally.
Hmm. That's right.
um uh we were we were the laughing stock.
Oh yeah.
The
I
entire
remember
filmmaking,
everyone's like, it's not going to work. It's crazy. And
it
it's like,
would
now, of
never
course,
work.
it is the standard, of course.
It would never work. And literally, you know, we sat down with our production teams. That was maybe like about 6 months before they went to Sydney to shoot, and and they looked at us because we were post production. Us being the editors,
Hmm.
there were three of us, and they said, "Okay, how can we do this? How can we run a digital film through a production and post production pipeline?"
Yeah.
And you know,
Because it's never been done before.
that was kind of a big thing for me, because
Yeah.
this is when I became, as we were doing it, I became aware that this was kind of where, you know, myself and Scott Balseric, Tony Patone, the other two editors, we were basically like, that was kind of our moment of sort of
Mhm.
pushing, like opening up, you know, pushing ILM a little more,
Yep.
and then and creating something which hopefully would become bigger even than ILM, which it did. You know, if you look at like the way that imaging is processed through most post-production facilities, VFX houses, commercial houses. Today, it's still basically a template from specifically Attack of the Clones
Mm.
that kind of became sort of the model, the reference for that. So that was what made that time special. You know, if I was to boil it down and sort of like the really kind of
Right. So one, the circle kind of completed itself because the sort of the inspiration for your career, basically you were able to then throw yourself into it with this attitude of like, I just have so much to learn, and who better to learn from than basically the pioneers, you know, who gets that chance? Basically very few people. And the other thing being that you were literally at a company that was leading the world basically in cinema with regards to the next generation. Because I mean, what's interesting, and just to put this in perspective for everybody, when Nick is talking about shot digitally, that means like, because before that the standard was of course shooting on film, right? You'd shoot with like an Arriflex camera. We'd be shooting on a regular, like emulsed film, and then you'd have to develop it. And then for years after that, after people started, you know, goofing around with digital, what was typically happening is directors were too scared to do it because they're like, oh, the grain won't look right, and they were right. They were scared that things are not going to look the way they want to look. And so what we did for years was we did this sort of digital intermediate pipeline, which was basically people were shooting on film, scanning that digitally so that they could actually do all the VFX digitally. And then it would have to get processed and then put back on film, basically, and then shipped to the theaters the standard way. Now that would be like, you know, basically talking about, it's like telling my 7-year-old daughter that phones used to hang on a wall with a cord. She'd be like, what? Who would do that? So I mean, it's crazy to think that here we are, and that's like ancient history, but you were there when basically that very bold decision to just be like, let's just build the new brave new world that we want to live in.
Yeah, and to go back to, you know, that connects with what we were saying earlier about George being a visionary.
Yeah.
Again, I cannot say it enough. It's the same exact example as what he did 5 years later with the Clone Wars, because he wanted to do it this way.
Yeah.
Nobody was getting on board. He went to I think he was trying to get 3,000. The distributors weren't getting on board. He went to 3,000 theaters and said, you know, laid out his plan. They
Yeah.
all balked at it and
For
said,
sure.
there's no way,
Yeah.
this can work.
Yeah.
We will not spend the money." And basically what he did is, just like with the Clone Wars, he said,
Wow.
"Fine, I will pay for your
Wow.
conversion.
Wow.
I will upgrade, your theater so it has a digital projector,
Wow.
so you
I
can
didn't
play
know
the
that
film."
happened. That's crazy.
And
Because Nick's talking about distribution. This is something that animators don't usually get exposed to. But this, like, again, going back to the film era where things were all in film, they would get, this film would then be duplicated and then on reels and then literally shipped in containers to theaters all over the world. That was how distribution was done. So now George is like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to send you these big digital files. While the internet wasn't like hardly even barely existing back then. So you can't just send that kind of data through a pipeline on the internet. You'd have to then basically, like, how do you do it? George would have had to basically come up with a pipeline that would work so that you could get those digital, like you said, like it sounds like not only did he find a way of transporting the digital files, but he also had to basically upgrade theaters just so those projectors were projecting digital files rather than actual like light through celluloid, right? That's so crazy to think that.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, he
That's nuts.
paid to have those theaters converted.
Yeah.
And we basically, I believe that the files were delivered by drives.
Yeah, like hard drives, basically. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that. I never heard the story that he had to upgrade the theaters, but that makes sense because, like, how else would he do it? It's like if you can't convince theaters to spend the money, but he's got this film and he knows it's more than just a film, because he was, basically this person pushing this big vision, but he also was running this dynasty, this juggernaut in the industry that he knew needed to move to digital. So basically he had to move the first big rock all by his powerful lonesome. That's crazy. So Lesley, you talked a little bit earlier about a shot. You talked about the coveted shots, the Yoda shots. I'm curious, why in your mind, in your animator mind, why were the Yoda shots the ones that everyone was like, oh yeah, you get a Yoda shot? Well, I'm just curious. Why was that the one?
Yoda's iconic.
I mean, I get it. I'm talking like I'm dumb. Pretend I'm dumb and I've never watched Star Wars before. So yes. So it was one that people just felt gravitated towards. I guess it was also one of the only digital characters other than Jar Jar, right? And we already know that not all the animators are super fond of animating him. So Yoda, obviously being Yoda, one of the OG characters from the universe, that would be a pretty awesome moment to be able to get, because the original one was a puppet, right? So this one was not. And I think were there any shots in the film at all that were practical, or were they all digital animation? Do you remember?
You know what? I was just thinking about that, and I don't. I think there might have been, but I'm not positive. I'm not
Okay.
100% positive. But Yoda was more interesting because he had dialogue. He would act. There were a lot of other digital characters in the movie, creatures and even stormtroopers were digital, but Yoda was and the rig for Yoda was just insane. Like there was so much information on his face alone that was just daunting.
Yeah.
You have all these targets around the lip that would go out into the cheek, that would go up into the
hold on.
eye.
So I have a super important question. Oh, we lost Nick. Hopefully he'll be back. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was an internet problem, but I'll make sure he gets back on the stage when he shows up. So maybe his favorite character is Jar Jar, and he was tired of us dissing him. It's possible. We'll have to ask him when he gets back. Because this predates Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings, by a lot, like this really predates Lord of the Rings. And back then, I remember high density facial meshes were not done in polygons. They were typically done in NURBS. And the rigs were ultra complicated because of that. Do you remember if they were NURBS or polygons? Because I don't think they would have been polygons. I don't think it would have been possible, because it wasn't until Lord of the Rings that showed up, where basically Bayrate came in and he's like the godfather of polygon modeling and completely dethroned this whole NURBS sort of wave that was happening in the industry at the time. So I don't know. I'd have to go back and check, but I would be unsurprised if it was like NURBS, and that would have been probably one of the reasons why it was a pain. And I bet you it was very slow to update in the interface. And what were you guys using software with? I guess it was Softimage.
Well, that's the thing. We were using Softimage, but we used a specific proprietary software that they designed to do facial.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So it was a very specific way of dealing with these kinds of things, and I guess because rigs were so heavy, they weren't terribly slow. Like I compared to today, definitely were slow.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but the software that we had, like you'd have to export your file, and then you'd bring in Carrie, and then you'd set it all up, and
Mm,
you'd be able to bring in that face rig and do the work because that wouldn't be on the normal
right.
model.
So hold on. So did you have to use two softwares to animate then? You do like the body and softimage? Oh, wow. So the face was literally done in a completely different package, kind of detached from, wow, man, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
How did people even make movies back then? It just didn't make any sense. Like I still talk to animators that were like, 'cause, I mean, you don't have to go back too many years from then till you get to the point where people are going to tell you stories about animating characters without IK. Like, you know, I think like Toy Story was like that, right? It was like, can you imagine? Can you imagine animating a shot, like a wide angle shot where the character's feet are clearly visible and you're moving the character around and it's like you got to counter animate those feet? Like I would die. I just don't think I would survive. I mean, I guess if you don't know any better and IK didn't get it invented yet, you're just thinking, man, this is hard. But it's just looking back on it now is unreal.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna bring up that shot just for fun, just for give people some context. I haven't seen our friend Nick show back up again. Hopefully, it's almost like his whole internet might have went down or something.
Oh dear.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure he'll be back. Okay, so let me just bring something up here. The only thing is, I think I need to. Okay, so people in chat, remind me. I'm gonna open up the chat interface here for a second. If I go and try to if I stream, if I try to share my screen or whatever, are you guys gonna get the audio from that? Because I want to make sure you guys get the audio from this too.
Oh right.
Let me see. I'm gonna try. I think the last time I tried it didn't work. Because it's like there's no option to share audio, and I remember doing a little reading on this, and it wasn't so obvious. But like, who can tell me who streams all the time inside of Discord? Anybody in chat? Let me know. I'm gonna try it though, and in worst case, it will just have the video. And oh, Nick's back. He made it back.
Great.
Welcome
Hey,
back,
guys.
sir. No problem.
Yeah, my internet decided not to cooperate.
I was making the joke that maybe Nick's favorite character is Jar Jar, and he just couldn't take that we kept dissing Jar Jar, and he's like, "I'm out. These guys can burn in hell for all I care."
How did you know?
I knew it. I just got this. I got a vibe, man. I got a vibe. Okay, so fun sidebar fact. The actor who played Jar Jar, I met recently. Is it Abdul? I always forget his name. I just met him recently. So sorry.
Ahmed.
Exactly. He is, honest to God, like I remember feeling nervous about meeting him because I'm just like, oh man, like I'm gonna meet Jar Jar. Like I can't. What's that guy like that gonna be like? And I don't remember watching any like making of where surely I saw him in lots of making of videos because he would have been running around on set as Jar Jar. But this guy is, honest to God, and if he ever sees this, I mean, hello, Ahmad. We met once. He has got to be one of the most articulate, one of the most intelligent people I've met in the longest time. I'm telling you, it surprised the hell out of me because, you know, because I know him through his character, and Jar Jar is this sort of laughable kind of goof, right? And so it was such a contrast that this actor was so articulate, and he was so. I mean, he's a force of nature. I would like to spend more creative energy in the same room with him because he's great. Okay, so sidebar over. I'm just about to share a shot that Lesley got to work on because we were talking about why were the Yoda shots so coveted, and we're gonna bring this one up here. And want to give us a little background before I show this because you told me that this one is meaningful for a particular reason. It was because it showed up somewhere. Why is this one particularly notable?
Oh, this in the director's notes on the DVD, if you play that, Rob Coleman does a little blurb about this particular shot, and unfortunately named me.
Oh yeah, you got named. You got outed.
When I was assigned this shot, I had a few Yoda shots, and this one in particular was, you know, the way that it was boarded. All he does is he turns and looks over his shoulder, and then that's it. And I thought, oh, okay, that's it. He looks over his shoulder at whoever is behind him.
Right.
And he's like, no, it's more than that. This is a key shot. This is a really important moment.
Mhm.
So the nice thing was about this shot is dealing with all that stuff on his face, all of that
Right.
amazing work things that you had to work with to create everything moving on his
Right.
face to give him the expression that he needed.
Right. And, sorry, I was a little teeny bit distracted trying to get it up, set up over here. But was it the first shot of the film with him, with Yoda? Oh, I gave it away. Sorry, my bad. No, I didn't, because we know we were talking about Yoda.
No.
It wasn't the first, okay, but it was a very
No.
dramatic moment of the scene in the movie, because like I think the viewers when watching the film, let me just show it and then we'll talk about it, because I'm getting to the point now where we're lacking context. So let me just play it.
Chancellor, if I may comment, I do not believe.
Do you guys hear that? Probably not, huh? People in chat. You do hear it. Oh, that's good. Okay, that means everyone in chat should hear it too. Awesome. Let me bring it back to the beginning. Because it just does it by default.
Chancellor, if I may comment, I do not believe
The situation is that serious. No, but I do, Senator. I realize all too well that additional security might be disruptive for you.
Chancellor, if I may comment,
Don't blink.
But it's funny though, because you think about it, because as far as Yoda shots are concerned, like there is so much meaning in this look that he's like, you know, you could like, you could probably write a book on this one moment in Yoda's life and basically what was going through his mind. There's a touch of distrust. There's a touch of questioning. There's so many different things. There's like the wisdom in there. Like you really like, and oh man, it's so good.
Yeah.
And to think that this had to be animated in soft homage for the body, and then basically then kind of the face being done completely separate, almost like you're animating blindly on the. You must have had to do a lot of. Was there a way of remarrying it so you could see it all together? Like, how did you preview it together?
Well, you'd do your body animation, and then once that was all done, you'd move it into the other software. You could still access the controls. You just had the additional targets and controls for the face, so you could still work.
Okay. Oh, okay. I get it. Okay, so it was feeding in. So it was another application, but it was somehow driving. I almost said XSI, soft homage. That's how it was working. It was sort of piping that data in, kind of at the same time. Like, could you see it in soft homage? The changes that you did over here in this other proprietary software, or?
Oh, you know what? That was a long time
Okay,
ago.
yeah. Sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around how an animator would have to do that. But it's funny because I remember similar stories from other animated features. Like, remember Dragonheart? And I remember people worked on that. Was ILM as well? Wasn't it Dragonheart? I think it was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember the nightmarish stories because the resolution of that dragon mesh was crazy. Now, I remember it was Sean Connery was the voice, and there was a lot of work that went into be able to articulate. And it was difficult because they wanted something to feel, because it was a VFX shot, right? The dragon was meant to feel like not a cartoon dragon, but like a real dragon hanging out. Who was it? Was Dennis Quaid? Was he the one? Was he the star? Okay, it's been a long time, but. So I remember they were trying to figure out how can they make a rig that would, you know, be able to move a high density mesh around in a way that would feel believable, but it's also speak. Like the phonetics are obviously very different with obviously a dragon probably couldn't speak the way we would speak. So there was that challenge as well. Like how do you do, I remember I had a couple buddies that worked on it and they were like saying they felt like they were inventing like a brand new technology basically. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nick, I'm curious. Do you have any in your mind? Like this is obviously a meaningful moment in Lesley's, day in the life as an animator, working on something like the prequel, Attack of the Clones, more specifically. I'm wondering if you have a similar moment. I mean, as an editor, obviously you're looking at the bigger picture. So I'm wondering maybe it's an episode or like I'm just what anecdotal stories kind of come to your mind when you think of something that was meaningful to you, specific regarding Star Wars, like a something that just felt somehow. I mean, you already gave us a couple really great ones when it big picture, but I'm curious on a level of episodic or film.
There's a lot. I think if I had to pick two now, and I might pick two.
Sure.
From now or tomorrow, but I would say if you look, so there's two moments. when we came back and did the final season of the Clone Wars, in the final 4 episodes, which are structured to play as one story, as one feature story, basically. There's specifically the scene that leads to Order 66, which is the scene when the clones get the order to kill all the Jedi, and it's a scene that the lead up to the scene and the scene itself, because the main character Ahsoka is with her best friend, who is a clone, and so we there's a lot about the way we played the moment story wise, and that ripples into the animation, which was intentionally the exact opposite way that you've seen that moment played before in the prequels. Instead of like being big and you sort of like in this epic manner, you go all over the galaxy and you see all these scenes of like armies and Jedi and the clones, like hundreds of clones turning on the Jedi, and these we want it to be very intimate, very close quarters, one room, and it's between. I mean, they're not alone, but it's literally between 2 people who are actually best friends, and play the moment of what happens when one of them gets an order they can't refuse to kill the other one, and the other would be in Tales of the Jedi, which came out last year, and that's the last episode of the arc. Which is about, it ties to the prequels because it's about it's sort of an arc that shows you the origin of the fall of Count Dooku and how he became, the former Jedi who turns.
Right.
And the last episodes, which is sort of the confrontation that ends up, that forces him to kill a character, and it's sort of like the final step in him crossing. And again, reason being that we played similarly that scene, there's an epic fight which is beautiful, beautifully choreographed, beautifully shot, but we played it in a very intimate way, and the reason why I bring that up, I mean, I think that across the board, from the writing all the way through execution, in terms of like shooting it, animating, lighting, post-production, I think they're very, very strong moments. But I would connect it to animation, and especially I would use it as an example for people who are young and wanting to get into animation, whether they want to be animators or just work in animation, because it's about the why. It's not these characters are, I mean, everything is a cartoon in that environment. Everything is fake. Everything is, it's an animated show. But if you look at those moments, you'll see that they're very cinematic. They feel like they're very immersive. Those moments, you'll see in the storytelling, and that's because everything, including the animation, is driven not by the software, not by the lighting, it's driven by the character and the why, the motivation. And I would say, look at those moments and start to inform or ask questions about the why of any moment that you're working on, any character you're animating, any story you're writing to become an animated feature or a scene, or a show. Because that's what will, if you want to create beautiful animation, you have to think of the why of that moment. You have to think about it as if you were, even if you were the animator, think about it as if you were the writer, as if you were the actor, as if you were, the director, and find motivation in why it is like that.
I really love hearing you say that, because it's funny, if you think about it, the why, the context, is the one rallying cry that every creative working on anything like this needs to understand, because because when a film or a show or whatever it is you're working on, if everyone gets that and they're all doing their part in order to basically provide this sort of the cohesion necessary for that why to feel connected and feel justified and feel like it's right, then I feel like that's when you're watching something and it just feels it just feels good, it's usually because the filmmakers as a whole were able to like rally around that. Because I mean, as an editor, obviously you are that why is super important, because as you're assembling these sequence of shots, they need to make sense, and the making sense part is filling in all the context. Like, you can't have an audience asking questions that they shouldn't be asking. Sometimes asking questions is a good thing, and especially if they're going to get answers, if that's what makes sense. But so you're always super, you need to be able to be on the lookout for making sure that context is provided, and so that the why is being delivered. But on an animator level, they're working on the more microscopic why, right? It's like the very, very specific specificity of the acting choices that also should be speaking to this sort of common why. I've never heard it said the way that you said it. This idea of it's all about the why, like everything is about the why. It's really cool hearing you say it like that.
Thanks. I mean, yeah, and if you can apply that example in any number of like good film scenes,
totally.
Good characters. Lesley shot, and I'm not going to presume that I can, like know the why that she found, but like when I look at it from the outside as a storyteller and as a viewer, I can tell you the reason why it's a powerful shot and it's a strong shot. Because even though, it is a simple shot of Yoda and all he does is he looks over his shoulder.
But
the motivation in the story is you have that moment where Palpatine, who plays basically Satan, is playing nice and is pretending to be like so concerned for Padme's sake, and has this like really nice and syrupy tone. And then we cut close on Yoda. It's basically saying, while everyone is kind of sucking up Palpatine's work,
his bullshit detector's going off.
It's looking at, like with this sort of like squinty eye, like quite right in this moment. So all of a sudden, there's like a strong motivation.
Totally.
In those words, you can hear those will be the choice of the actor.
That's right.
The choice of the director on set.
That's right.
And the animator, like, and this is one of the things I love about working in animation, is that you get to play all the roles of filmmaking at every stage. Whether you're an animator, an editor, it doesn't matter whether you're shooting, if you're doing layout or story. You have to be able to understand all the disciplines of the craft of filmmaking.
Totally.
And you will only be really, really, really good if you do that. If you try to limit yourself to like, well, all I do is animate, all I do is this.
That's
you're not gonna be able
good
to,
advice. You're not an animator. If you're working on a film, you're not an animator. You're a filmmaker. You're a filmmaker who's worried about the big picture. You're just bringing a certain set of skills to the party. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't basically understand the core like language of film, though. You do need to, because you need to know how to execute your role in that bigger picture. So I say the same thing about games, right? It's like a lot too many animators come into the game industry and they're thinking, I'm just gonna make animation, make these characters move in really cool ways. It's like, that's part of the job, but you're making a game. You need to understand games. You need to understand that the animations you are making aren't going to just play on the screen completely like disconnected from what the audience is trying to do, or like it's a very different experience. You are literally creating movements for a character that are going to psychologically sort of resolve an impulse from the player that gets transmitted into a controller through the air, now that we're in Bluetooth era, and into a console that will then drive a character, and then they will move and do a thing that you needed to do. And it's very visceral, that sort of that connection psychologically. That's the job. And if you can't imagine that, if you can't think about that side of the equation of like why you're making that animation and what things it needs to do other than just look good, then you don't understand the job. So just like an animator on a film, you got to know the why of the shot. Like what's the purpose of the shot in the film? What does the audience absolutely need to get out of it? And it's again, going back to all the different layers, like if you got it's the camera, it's the acting, it's the editing, it's the directing, it's like so many things have to get done right for it to feel good. It's amazing, really, when you think about it. It's like a miracle every single time a really great film is made, because it's not exactly easy to get to align all those very, very many layers. Is this the shot, by the way? I have it up. I don't know if you can see it. Someone dug it up. I want to see if I'll play it for a bit and tell me if it's the right one.
I think it might be the beginning of that scene. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yes, Lord Sidious.
Rex, it's Anakin.
Is this ringing any bells? Is
Yeah,
this? Oh yeah. Is there? Should I be a little bit further along? Because I mean, it's a 5-minute clip, so I don't think we're gonna watch 5 minutes. But I mean, should I jump ahead a little bit to the spot? Like, I think there was a moment in this sort of scene that you were kind of vibing on.
You can probably. I'll tell you when. So if you let it play from here, I think that's probably like another minute and a half until basically like, all hell breaks loose.
Okay, I'll let it play for a little bit. Then.
What's happening?
Let's enjoy.
Stay back! Find him. Find him. Vibes. Find him!
Yeah, you can stop there.
That's cool. You know, having watched you, because you lived through the let me just stop streaming that. Oh. You lived through all of the seasons, so I'm curious, like, because like this is much later in the evolution of this whole saga, right? It's like, what season was this? Do you remember?
This is technically season 7.
Yeah.
But after basically a gap of 6 years, you know,
Okay.
when we went off the air.
Because I remember it really matured. Like there was like it really felt like like any show. Like I don't know if anyone's ever gone back and watched like the first season of The Simpsons. It's like weird. It's weird. Like they'd swapped out some character voices, but years later, and it just feels like they hadn't quite nailed the timing yet. Like towards like season 7 and onwards, like I really feel like this show it hit a rhythm. You know what I mean? And it just kept gathering. It was like a snowball going down a mountainside. So if anyone has not seen Clone Wars, I really do recommend it. It is pretty awesome. And I felt like it got almost darker. I felt the same way when I watched, and it took me many years in my life before I finally watched this, and I was embarrassed that I'm mad at myself for having waited so long. But Avatar, The Last Airbender, I really finally watched them, and I was like, this is years ago now, and I'm like, whoa! What was cool about it is every season, it felt like it was like Harry Potter in a way. It felt like it matured almost like with the audience that was watching it. Like if you started watching it as like maybe a 10-year-old, by the time you get to the last book, you're older, and so the subject matter was a little darker, and it was, I don't know, man, I really like a show that really just evolves with the audience, and so like the audience feels like almost like they're ingrained somehow into the actual and I felt like that part, like I'd heard stories of the crew and the team and just the creative team in general were really trying to like they really try, like I felt like there was an interesting effort to listen to feedback from the fans, and like I don't know, I heard rumors that was the case, and there was a lot of effort to really make the show what it needed to be, but like also in a way that just was shining, a shining example of what people were hoping it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I mean, I think that there's definitely a maturity curve. Very much, our audience grew with the show.
Oh yeah.
Is one of the most
So many
rewarding
years.
things to talk to grown adults today who talk about that being their Star Wars in the
Oh yeah.
6 or
Totally.
7 years that they grew. But we did as well. Sometimes, as people, some of us started very young. I was already a little older, but still, I was very, very young in my career and had a lot to learn. I mean, when I started, there's so much mentoring that went on. And George taught us so much, so much. Dave, and then Dave taught me as well so much, still does. And we learned our craft. I mean, George took us to task. He used to tell us, Dave and I still joke about this. He used to say, dare to be great, and he would not be afraid to tell us when we were wrong. But he would say it's okay, because he could tell. I think there's a level of collaboration that he hadn't always gotten, and what he appreciated was that he knew that we wanted we wanted to engage creatively, but we also wanted to learn. And so he would say, okay, I'll show you, and we'll we'll go through it together. And so you see all these curves basically. Yeah, you see them definitely progressing from when we started in 2006 all the way to the scene you just saw.
Oh
And,
yeah.
it was definitely a very special. I mean, those final 4 episodes, I was very fortunate enough to be invited to go to the final mix for those at Skywalker Ranch, and that was a very special moment. When we finished on the last one, I mean, it was like a It's a Wonderful Life moment, because it was like
For sure.
literally, I think it was December 19th. It
Not
was a
that you
Friday.
remember it or anything. Not that you etched it into your brain.
Well, I remember it because we were all going on vacation. It was like the last.
Right.
It was a Friday before the holiday break,
Right.
and so we
Seems
went
fitting.
to. We went to. We worked late, and we came out. It was probably, I don't know, like 9-10 p.m. And I remember we came out of the tech building where the sound mixes happen, and that was it. That was kind of like we were done. We were finally done. We had finished this long journey. This was like 10 years after the Clone Wars had first aired, and 12 years after we had started working on it. And
epic. 12 years.
And I looked at each other, and it was like, honestly, the only thing that could have added more like Hollywood corniness to the moment was if it had started to snow, basically.
Yeah,
and
totally.
We looked at each other, and we were like, okay, well, Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Wow.
We did it. And I was very, very lucky that Dave had me there that evening. So yeah, that was definitely. And speaking of like curve, that was kind of like, it was what gave a lot of weight to that button was that it wasn't just, well, we finished it, but like you could sense it's like going to school and finally getting your diploma. You're like, okay, well, this is kind of like us now, having graduated, and hopefully, we did a good job. And and speaking to what you talked about, like the relationship with our viewers, our fans, our audience, always. I mean, it's a two-way thing. We always look up to George, and Dave always said, if you want to know how to make Star Wars, it's very easy. There's a guy who left you 6 movies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, basically the
movies.
Bible exists already. So
and then but we also always look over our shoulders at the community of the viewers, the fans, our audience, because we consider that to be like a two-way symbiotic relationship. Like Dave also always will still kind of teach the younger people who start on our crew, and he'll say, start as an artist, and he'll say, no matter what you're doing, no matter whether you're in a creative and non-creative position, if you're an animator, if you're a producer, I don't care, start by telling the story you would want to watch. Once you start, lay that aside, apply your craft, apply your technique, your skills, but start with what you would want to see yourself.
So you're basically emotionally invested.
Exactly. Then like, set it aside, use your skills, apply your craft, and at the very end, reconnect to that. To the touches. That's what's going to push it over the edge.
That's good advice. We started late, so it's already it's actually 8 past the hour. I don't want to make assumptions as to how much time you guys have. Is it okay if we go for another 10 minutes? Because I want to make sure we had a little bit of time for Q&A. Is it okay? And it's not okay. It's okay if you can't, because we are definitely over what I said we would be doing. 10 minutes? Do I have 10 minutes? I love it. Yeah. Okay, good. So, as promised, we are going to hand it over to our friends in the audience. If you have, maybe I'm sure there are many people in the audience right now that are actually qualifying as one of the fervent number of fans in from the Star Wars sort of universe. And it's funny too, because there's niches, right? You could be a Clone Wars fan, but totally not like something else. Like it's that's what I think is especially amazing right now with Star Wars, is it's really covering a lot of bases now with the Visions. It's really tapping into a whole other audience, but yet also some of these same old audience, right? I find it really fascinating, this sort of overlapping thing that we find. So if you got a question for one of our amazing guests, now is the time. Just let me know, or let Scott know, because he can hand you the mic and we can have a little conversation. But we only got 10 minutes because I'm bad at this and we started late. In the meantime, maybe to kind of warm up this sort of Q&A. Oh, Scott's coming.
Sorry, I'll jump in, Brent.
Dude,
there
yeah, go
are
for
some, if you open up the chat on the side, there's some questions starting to come in.
Okay, but they don't want it.
One
But can we give them the speaker, or like can they ask, or how do we want to do it?
Yeah, so Viteri, can you just maybe let us know if you want to come in and
Because I prefer that. It's way more fun. Yeah.
For sure.
But you don't need to. I don't want to peer pressure anybody into doing it. I only peer pressured two people tonight. It was Lesley and Nick. They had to show up and show their faces.
If you ask your question and then maybe just say at the end if you have mic access, we can bring you into the stage.
So Viteri's going to ask the first question. I see it there at the bottom.
Maybe for this one, Brent, we can just ask.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that we meant. So you want me to sort of say it out loud, or the question I had, or
yeah, like the old days.
Like the old days. Okay, good old days.
Yep.
Okay, so Viteri, who may or may not actually, we may hear his voice at some point, but he's asking this question: despite the technological advances in 3D animation, what would be the most important lesson you've learned in your careers? Sorry for the vague question. So I mean, obviously. I don't think it needs to be animation specific. I think just technology in general, how it might have impacted, your job as an animator, Lesley, and your job as an editor, Nick. Lesley, go first, please.
Well, I started out in 2D animation, so I was working in that industry until it was the death knell was banging for that, and 3D started to make its way into the stream. I had to make a decision to die on the vine or jump into a computer. And it was the hardest thing to transition into. But once you understand that it's just a tool, technology is constantly changing. It's rapidly changing, especially now. So it's just a tool. You still need to understand motion. You still need to understand timing, the strength of a pose. There's a long list to go through, but the technology shouldn't be anything to make or break. Is icing, really.
Yeah, and I would completely second what Lesley said, and basically I would say technology is irrelevant. You are very fortunate in that you work in a creative field. You're an artist basically, and as such, the principles of your craft, whether we do it with a piece of paper, a stone, a rock, or with a computer and a keyboard or an AI, don't let anybody tell you. I'm old enough to have heard that story many times that this is the technology that's going to change the game. None of it. The game actually is something that the craft, the art, has nothing to do with the tools.
Yeah.
The tools are mechanics. And so the only thing that I would say that is very relevant, that's actually crucial to your interaction with the technology and the changing technology, whatever it is, because it'll change again in 5 years and 10 years, is be flexible, be open. Don't set yourself in stone and say, this is the be all end all way of doing it, and I will never do it another way because this is the way. That's what will kill you. It's not the technology change. It's your inability to see that the technology is irrelevant and then just anchor yourself to a particular tool or way of doing it.
Yeah.
If you stay true to the craft itself, the rest is just mechanics. And like Lesley said, sometimes it is, arduous or scary. Say, oh my God, this UI looks nothing like what I'm used to, or before I was doing it with a pencil, now I have to actually run a mouse, or before I had a keyboard, now I have to interface with an AI. And at the end of the day, you're gonna apply the same skills. And if you have that craft, and if you're open to that buffer, that period of retraining yourself on the tool of the day, that's the most whatever part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing your craft and focusing on it makes you a good craftsman, makes you a good artist. But making sure you can adapt and evolve as technology changes makes you marketable. Basically, make sure you have a job. Otherwise, you're gonna end up maybe hoping that someone's going to pay you for an animation commission or something, and then maybe that'll work out for you. But good luck. Yeah, I think that's really well said. I liked the way you modernized that with dropping a little mention of AI in there, because there is a lot of hysteria right now, and in some cases rightfully so. But I really, when I take a big step back, my big feeling on AI, it's hysteria. I've seen it before in the animation community when 2D switched to 3D. I saw a lot of hysteria then, because I lived through that like Lesley did, because I learned and started in 2D just like her. And then the same thing I saw with motion capture. Motion capture showed up and it terrified animators all over, and it hasn't taken any jobs away. I mean, in a way, maybe it's sort of, maybe people, can't get work on a video game that's very lifelike, that's all using motion capture, but you're stopping yourself by basically not just being like, oh, the way I like to think of it is, it's very similar to Nick's philosophy, but I like to always ask myself as an artist, rather than be worried about and being bothered by the fact I have to adapt and learn new things, ask yourself this: as a craftsman or craftsperson, what new things might I be able to do now with this technology? Things that were maybe difficult before. I remember I always talk about the good old days of 2D animation, and 2D animation was, I miss them in many ways, but I also have to say 3D was pretty awesome and gave people that can't really draw a chance now to animate. And there are people that can't draw to save their lives that are way better animators than I'll ever be, and like, who cares that I can draw? It's because drawing was part of the tool interface, right, with a pencil. It wasn't a necessary thing for me to animate. It wasn't at the core. And I often say that I often talk about the 12 animation principles, and how there was strong drawing was one of those, and like that, it needs to be modernized. It's strong drawing. I think the 9 old men were really talking about know your tool, and your tool is a pencil, and your pencil, you need to be a draftsperson to be able to use it in order to animate. And so it was just an interface point. So I'm like, I often say, sort of like, which is perfect right now, is to just basically embrace the technology, or embrace the tool, learn it, and learn how to leverage it in order to be a better artist, rather than kind of be mopey about it, I guess. Because otherwise, what's your other option? Your other option is being a dinosaur and becoming extinct in a number of years. And I saw a lot of people become dinosaurs, and I'm sure Lesley did as well. 2D animators that just could not or would not make the transition. And some of them have survived as storyboard artists. Some of them are actually some of the best storyboard artists in the industry right now, because they were the best ones, and that's why they still had a job, because they were able to like transition to storyboarding. Anyways, this is an interesting topic. I could probably talk for hours about this. Okay, there's more questions. Sienna, do you have the ability to take the mic? I'm going to do the last couple questions here, and then we're going to let these amazing people go. Maybe not. I'm just going to ask it the old-fashioned way. So we're going to do that. Unless, Scott, you want... Oh, Sienna's typing something. Maybe she can. All you got to do is, I think, ask for the mic, or Scott can just give it to you. Oh, what just happened? Looked like she was getting the access. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay, Sienna's going to ask her question. I think you have the mic. Can you? I don't see you on the stage, though. It's weird. Maybe you have to accept... She asked for... Sorry. Usually this is not as clunky as that. Okay, Sienna, just I'm going to move it along here. Apology for moving without you, but I'll ask your question. Hopefully I'll do it justice. So she's asking, sorry, I shouldn't be assuming a she, but Sienna is asking, I don't know if I'm even saying your name properly. Do you have advice for young artists that live in countries where animation is just starting as an industry? It's a big question.
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
It's a hard one. I would say, I mean, it depends on what you want to do, on a lot of personal levels. I would say if you are trying to grow as an artist within your culture, and if you want to your country, your culture to also grow, I would say, even if it doesn't feel like it's as developed as in a country, a neighboring country, or another place, don't lose hope, because we are at a threshold right now where it's exploding all over the place. there is no, I mean, the industry in general, but animation definitely is decentralizing hugely.
Big time.
And I would say there is no place, there is no country, there is no region where if you told me, I was just talking with a friend of mine the other day, one of our assistants, who before she came to work with us was working with an animation studio in Nepal. You know, so you know wherever you are, there can be if there's not already, there might even be, even if you don't think, you know, do your research. I just found out, you know, I'm French, that there's like this huge program in France. I mean, France is already a big animation producer, but like they just freed the 350 million euros, but spread across several parts of the industry. But a good chunk of that went to 12 new animation studios in France.
Oh wow!
You know, there's animation studios starting in Spain and Croatia. You know, there's like places everywhere. So chances are that there is a place somewhere around you, not too far. If there isn't, that there will be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say be determined, do the research, maybe see based on where you are if there's a place you can go to, and maybe for temporarily apply skills there, learn, and then come back to your country. If you really want to grow, then you can bring your experience back a couple of years, 5 years later, and help with your experience be able to help grow the industry in your country.
Lesley, any thoughts?
I agree with that 100%. Sometimes even when you are in a place where there's a lot of studios, you sometimes have to, well, I had to, before remote working happened, I'd have to pack up and move somewhere for work. And I did that because of the project that I wanted to be a part of.
Par for the course.
Yeah, but now I agree. Experience is experience wherever you can get it. Sometimes places that are just starting up can be a bit too green, and things can go sideways. I'm not sure what area or what country that you're speaking about, but I would say that, you know, do your research, look at projects that interest you. Look at the studios that do those projects and see if you can get access to anyone to talk to there. So that it always helps to work on something that you're really interested in versus just, I'm going to go and get a job at that place because it's down the street.
And I mean, my 2 cents here would be just, you know, 2 things. One of them is, you know, with online learning being a thing now, you know, if you're someone who's just starting out, then you can sharpen your skills, focus on your skills. Because one thing I can tell you is it doesn't matter where you live in the world. If you are really talented and you typically get there by hard work, you're going to get noticed, and you're going to get opportunities you otherwise would not. So don't worry. It's a little bit like a George Lucas philosophy, like build it and they will come. Build yourself as someone who, you know, market yourself, get better and put yourself out there. And the second part of that would be, you know, post-pandemic world that we live in now, with all the toothpaste out of the bottle, it's not going back in. There's always now going to be more and continue to be more opportunities to work remotely. So as Nick is saying, there are studios popping up everywhere as the industry becomes more global. But part of that is, like, take a look at Agora Studio, right? That is exactly what they've built an entire, you know, business strategy around, this concept of a virtual production studio that hire artists all over the world. So work on yourself and put yourself out there, and you will get noticed eventually, and you're going to get opportunities. So that might require you to move. You know, prepare yourself. That could be the thing, because we're far enough away from the pandemic that there's a lot of studios are now expecting people to be coming into the studio regularly. But there are a lot of even, you know, more I don't want to say progressive, but there are newer studios that are building themselves from the ground up with this idea that, no, we want to be a remote studio. We'll have a studio where people can come into, but we want to make sure that we can build a place where we can leverage all this amazing talent that could live in places where they can't move out of, you know, because there's lots of reasons why you might not be able to. Maybe you're taking care of family and you just can't just get up and leave them. You want to be able to work, but also want to take care of your family. So I find it very interesting that more people that would otherwise not be able to work in the industry, that might be some of the best animators we've never even seen yet, are now moving forward, going to get an opportunity to shine and basically excite us all with their work. Okay, there's 2 last questions. One of them is from Scott. He always asks a juicy one, so we'll do that. Scott, you want to ask it yourself? You'll be the only person who gets to ask it.
I guess I can.
Do it.
Yeah, Nick, this one was for you. It just sort of came up when you were talking about editing in animation. You have boards in the Animatic, but I'm just wondering, as an editor for animation, how much changes in the cutting room?
Oh God.
Not always the same, but it can be huge. I mean, animation. One of the things I love about it is that, again, all the disciplines are collapsed to a significant degree. So even the tightest story is going to require, it's the nature of the beast. It evolves as it's produced, much more than other forms of film, because it's so nonlinear, and it's literally being written, rewritten, reshot, and not in a way that those terms sometimes imply in other parts of the industry. It's just kind of how an animated story evolves. So there's sort of like that curve, which is always there. Then there's like cases, for good reasons or bad reasons, where I mean, we had, back on the Clone Wars, we had scripts that were 98% plus rewritten between the moment where they were locked for production and the moment where we were locking the actual episode. It doesn't happen as much, but we will, like, I just finished working on a very, very big story for the past 5 months, and that's just, I mean, the story was already great and tight when it came fully formed in script phase, but the nature of it was so big that as you put it together, it required it, and I was working with our showrunner, with our head writer, with the episodic director, and the four of us would get together and, like, brainstorm, rewrite, reshoot. And when I say reshoot, that's the thing, it's not the same as a movie. It's the reshooting is another form of rewriting, because one influences the other.
Totally.
The reshoot, like, drives, then dialogue changes, or vice versa. A line says, okay, well, then we shouldn't have, or if the line is becoming this, we should say it on a wide because that carries the message better, or we should be on a close, et cetera, et cetera. So it's and again, it's a tremendous learning opportunity. It's one of the things I love the most about animation is animation will teach you. It'll teach you to be a director. It'll teach you to be a writer. It'll teach you to be an actor. If you love it, and if you really put the time and talent in it, you will learn how to be a filmmaker in a more fully formed way than many other filmmaking mediums will.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, we got one last question, then I'll let you guys go. Hopefully that's okay. I've overstayed my welcome here. And I know that, and I will owe you both tasty beverages at some point when we meet in person. TJ asks, what are your opinion? Okay, this one's, I think this one's specifically for Sir Nick, so hopefully you don't feel left out, Lesley. No one asked me a question, so I guess we can just pout in the corner or something. What are you? What is your opinion with the fan theory? Or sorry, what is your opinion with fan theory, or when some fans try to find loopholes in the series you're working on? That's a very good question. Like, does it? Because I mean, editing obviously is so closely related to story, because it's visual storytelling, and I'm like, does it? Yeah, that's a really good question. Does it get on your nerves? Like, how do you deal with that?
No, the simple answer would be no. It doesn't get on my nerves. I mean, first, again, I had a very good teacher. That's another thing George taught us, how to like, ignore it. And when I say ignore it, I mean that in the best possible way. It's not ignore it as in we don't care, because I've talked about how much we care about our relationship with viewers and fans.
Yeah.
It's more about, like, as an artist, you have to commit to, and that touches on what, like, do something that you would want to see, that you would want to read, that you would want to, and again, you have to commit to that idea. And like any piece of art, actually, whether you're a musician or a sculptor, or it doesn't matter, is you have your own emotion, your own reason, your motivation. You put it out in the world, then it's going to connect with people, probably in some ways that exactly are how you intended, and sometimes in completely other ways, good or bad. It's not about good or bad. It's just, that's the nature of art, which is what's beautiful, is when it succeeds, even when it creates a horrible reaction, it basically creates a reaction. You connect with what we're seeing,
for better or for worse, right?
Yeah, and so you basically have to be okay with the fact that
Yeah.
once it's out,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are gonna react. They're gonna, react in different ways.
totally. Yeah, like I think a lot of fans, they don't like, it's difficult because if imagine what a series would look like if it was basically made in real time, trying to deal with feedback coming in from fans. Can you imagine what kind of gobbledygook it would be? Because it would be just fragmented. They might be amazing ideas, but it's not about singular ideas. It needs to be packaged together, and it has to be cohesive, and it needs to be going somewhere. And so I get it. It's not that you don't care. It's that you can't really allow yourself to be distracted. You have to commit and keep going. And it may not be for everybody, but like, you got to believe in the process, and you have to believe in the big picture.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good. Okay. My esteemed guests, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening. I really do appreciate it. It was fun hanging out. Nick, it was amazing to meet you. You seemed like a very, very awesome person. I'm sure we would have many stories to tell if we had a bit more time. I look forward to the day that we may cross paths physically, and so I can provide said tasty beverage, and we can talk about some of those fun stories. Lesley, it has been amazing to see your beautiful face. It has been way too long, and we should probably try to not let it be so long between our next encounter. How's that sound?
I agree.
Okay. Thank you both very much. And thank you, everyone, Agora community members who hung out. Hopefully you had fun just chilling with us for a little bit. We would like to start doing these things a bit more often once we kind of take care of this big push that we're making right now. But stay tuned. See everybody on the next one. Cheers.
Nice to meet you, Lesley. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.